And welcome to the Auditor General Committee meeting. I call this Auditor General Committee meeting of Thursday, February 2nd, 2023 to order. This committee meeting is being convened by electronic means as authorized under Part 14 of the Procedure Bylaw. As such, committee members may participate in person or by electronic means. If any committee member loses connection during the voting process, we have staff on hand to facilitate getting you back online quickly while we suspend the voting process. The contact information has been circulated to you. Members of the public can view the proceedings via the live stream and YouTube link, which will be tweeted out by @VanCityClerk on Twitter. Video of committee members speaking, presentations, amendments, and vote results will be projected to viewers when available. Committee members are reminded to please enable their video to ensure quorum is maintained during the meeting under Section 14.13 of the Procedure Bylaw if attending virtually. The external members of the committee can access the speaking queue by clicking the raise hand icon on WebEx or raise your hand. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. We thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to working with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. I also want to take a moment to recognize the immense contributions of the City of Vancouver's staff who work hard every day to help make our city an incredible place to live, work, and play. Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Councillor Kirby-Young,
Present.
Councillor Dominato, not here. Councillor Fry is the chair, and Councillor Boyle,
Present.
Councillor Montague, and External Representative Archie Johnson.
Present.
The meeting has quorum, Chair Fry.
Great, thanks, Clerk. And before we begin, plan for the day, we have some announcements. Any comments on the agenda item can be sent to the committee using the web form on the city's website. The link to that form will be tweeted out on @VanCityClerk. I also want to note the City of Vancouver's longstanding commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, including utmost respect for all genders. I remind committee members that when addressing speakers and staff, we will avoid using gendered honorifics and will instead refer to the person by first and last name, role, or title. There are 3 reports and other business on today's agenda, as well as a motion to go in camera. Finally, I'd like to remind committee members that if amendments are brought forward, they must be submitted to the clerk in final written form before the council member introduces them. Please ensure the clerk has received your amendments by using the council meeting amendments DL. We will begin with the motion to go in camera later today. The committee is required to meet in camera later today. The reason and authority under the Vancouver Charter are listed in the agenda. Would someone like to move that motion to go in camera later this afternoon? All those in favor say yay. So moved by Councillor Montague. All those in favor? Yay.
Yay.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Upon adjournment of the public portion of today's meeting, we will take a 5-minute recess to transition into the in-camera portion of our meeting, allowing sufficient time for staff to vacate the chamber. The next item on the agenda is the 2022 annual report. And I would now like to invite the Auditor General to introduce and present this item. Over to you, Mike.
Great, thank you. Let's just hop into the next slide, please, Elise. Want me a little closer? Does that work better? Okay, thank you. So I have great pleasure of providing my first annual report as Auditor General for the City of Vancouver. I released this in conjunction with the 2023 audit plan, which was circulated to Council last week and is now available on my webpage. The Auditor General bylaw requires me to produce only an annual report, essentially a record of what my office has done. And while a record of past achievement is fine on its own, I think it's far more meaningful when it's related to what we also plan to intend to do going forward. So to achieve that, my annual report is also my office's 2023 operational plan. So you can see in one place how we've performed, where we've been, where we are now, and where we're headed in the future. Overall, I have to say, looking back on 2022, it was a fairly satisfying year with an achievement of some pretty significant milestones, most importantly being the transition from building a new legislative audit office to operating one. which began with our first formal audit meeting with the Development Buildings and Licensing Department on March 17th. As at the end of the year, December 31st, we had 3 audits underway, the first of which the committee will be discussing in just a few moments. And while the hiring process took longer than I wanted and resulted in delays in starting all 3 of the audits, nonetheless, I'm pleased to report that we had a full staff complement by the end of October. Next slide, please. And here they are. So from left to right, Felix Chu, Subran Premachandran, Laurie Barrett, who's with me here today, Jenny Lau, Kenny Cham, Stacy Lee, Cindy Chang, and Lorinda Stoneman. I'm really quite pleased and proud of this team, and I'd like to tell you just a little bit more about them. Next slide, please. Every staff member has at least an undergraduate degree in a wide range of fields, commerce, criminology, history, politics, biology, and general arts. And all but one of the team also has either a graduate degree or a professional designation, and some have both. Graduate degrees, both at the master's and doctoral level, range from business to criminology, education, and child and youth care. As far as the professional designations, we have 5 chartered professional accountants, 3 certified information systems auditors, 2 certified fraud examiners, and 2 certified internal auditors. Combined, we have over 70 years of audit experience. Some of us are fairly new, some of us have been at it for a little while, but it's a pretty great mix. Next slide, please. Thanks. Like any leading organization, we monitor our performance through a framework that outlines why we're here and what we're trying to accomplish. Ours begins with a mandate drawn verbatim from the Auditor General bylaw to assist Council in holding itself and city administrators accountable for the quality of stewardship over public funds and for achievement of value for money in city operations. Our 4 goals, each with an associated key performance indicator or 2, describes how we fulfill our mandate and execute on the mission, which is to provide assurance that the City of Vancouver services are delivered with due care for economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. I'll go through each goal individually. We do the next slide, please. So in 2022, goal 1 was to make the office operational. I plan to hire 8 staff, and as you just saw a minute ago, a well-qualified group of 8 is in fact now in place. I aim to have our physical office space in the West Annex set up by June 30th, but due to delays with permitting and contractor selection, construction didn't actually start until October, but was in fact substantially complete by the end of the year. The chair has been by to see the new space, and I would invite all committee members to come by and visit at their convenience. Lastly, foundational components such as policies and procedure manuals and audit manual were completed on time by the end of Q3. However, team training was pushed back to Q4 because of the hiring delays I spoke of a moment ago. Making the office operational in 2022 was my primary goal. It was job 1, if you can say. And I'm happy to report it's been accomplished. So as a consequence, we're going to be discontinuing this and adopting a new goal 1 in 2023. Next slide, please. This past June, Council approved a motion from this committee to assign responsibility for the city's whistleblower function to the Auditor General. The city's work on revising the city's whistleblower policy is ongoing, but in anticipation of this change, the new goal 1 is to establish an independent whistleblower function within my office with 2 KPIs. First is to hire 2 investigators to support the function. Funding for this was included in my annual budget request, which was endorsed by this committee and approved by Council on January 17th. The second KPI is to develop and implement procedures for the intake, processing, investigation, and reporting of whistleblower activities. What this is going to look like exactly, I'm not sure. It will depend very much on what comes out in the whistleblower policy. So I've put this back to Q4 for completion. Next slide, please. Goal 2, to produce high quality work, is something that I think will have enduring value for many years. This year, I had intended to produce 3 audit reports. Unfortunately, hiring delays pushed all of this back. Our first audit report was released last week, and our second is scheduled for the 22nd of this month. A study of whistleblowing practices was presented to this committee in April, and while not an audit, it nonetheless was a report, so I'm counting that as 1. The second KPI speaks to external quality review by my practice regulator. With the release of our first audit report, a file inspection is scheduled for March, the results of which will be reported to this committee in accordance with the Auditor General bylaw. And go to the next slide, please. Goal 3 is to provide city departments with objective and helpful recommendations, as evidenced by 3 things. the proportion of recommendations accepted by audited departments, the proportion of audit recommendations endorsed by this committee, and the proportion of recommendations implemented over 3 years. With the issuance of our first report, we'll actually be able to start measuring the first two of those KPIs as of today. The next slide, please. The last goal is for our work to yield cost savings or enhanced revenues that at least match our operational costs over 5 years. With the issuance of our first reports, we'll start measuring this result this year, although we won't be able to fully measure it until we've been around for 5 years. That concludes my comments. If there are any questions.
Moving to the committee members, do we have any questions on this item?
Chair, I do have one. I'm just trying to get my panel going. Oh, there we are.
Is that, sorry, I see Archie hand up. Sorry, Councillor Kirby-Young, did you have your hand up as well?
I managed to put myself
you're
on
on
the
the queue.
panel.
I see
but
it. Okay.
Go in any order that you like,
You can go right ahead, Councillor Kirby-Young.
unless our external panel member might like to go first. I'm happy to go after Archie.
I've already put you on the queue.
Okay. Thank you, Mike, for the overview and the update. With respects to the whistleblower function, which I know was not originally contemplated when the office was set up, but I think we've identified and council supported the importance of having that, the independence of that function, distinct out of sort of staff administration. I'm wondering if you can walk us through the timeline, given we're in Q1, why it takes up to Q4 to get that set up? Because I know that, if I recall correctly, there were some changes made to the whistleblower policy to facilitate this function happening in the OAG. And so I'm just wondering what steps need to take place, or is it hiring, or why does it take till the end of the year to get that up and running?
Okay, thanks for that. Actually, the revised whistleblower policy has not yet come before council. I'm not running that show, that's the city, so I'm not really able to speak to the status of that. So I believe the policy will come to this committee for discussion and then be recommended to council for adoption. And then not knowing exactly what that looks like, I haven't started the hiring process because I don't have job descriptions in place. I have a rough idea, but the intention was that I won't be actually having whistleblower staff on board until Q4. So putting together what we're actually going to do is going to be very much derived from what the whistleblower policy actually looks like. And at this point, I can't speak to that.
Okay. Do you have, following up on that then, and thanks for the reminder, I think perhaps it was different bylaws that we updated, so I appreciate that. But do you have any indication from city staff as to the status of the updates to the whistleblower policy, or when staff will be bringing that forward? And do you have any concern, sort of a corollary question to that, that it's going to be an independent function and yet you have staff determining what the policy is?
Well, suffice it to say that I won't be recommending any changes to the whistleblower policy that I can't support. So while I'm not involved at this particular juncture, I will be reviewing it before it goes to you.
Okay, but do you have any sense of timeline? Have city staff indicated to you where that sits on their
I check
on
in
their
with
plate,
them.
and when they
I'm a
anticipate
bit of a
getting
squeaky wheel. I
something?
check in with them rather regularly, and I understand that work is ongoing, but I can't speak to exactly where that is.
Okay. All right. That's probably a good follow-up action item for the committee then, to look into that, because it would seem beneficial to move it forward. Okay, and then I guess my last question is: were there sort of anything that you didn't mention in your report that you would want to highlight for the committees, or anything that stood out that you were surprised by this year? Did you encounter any hurdles that you didn't anticipate? Is there something else we should be asking you?
No, not really. I've had great cooperation from city staff as my teams have gone out and begun our first 3 audits. It's been an interesting process. Every day we learn something new. The city is a large and complex organization, and virtually all of my team are new to the city. And we've had great support, and as we've done our work.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'll leave it there, and thank you, Mike.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Kirby-Young. Councillor Montague.
Thanks, Chair. Hopefully just one quick question here. You mentioned the delays in getting the office set up. So there was only one audit completed instead of the 3 you were hoping to. You have a target of 6 for 2023. Are you hoping to play a little catch up, or is everything just getting pushed a little?
Thanks for that. We have one out the door already this year. That was last week. We have another one coming out in about 3 weeks' time. We have another one scheduled to be released in April. So there's 3. We start a new audit, we do a follow-up audit, and we do a report on our whistleblowing activities at the end of the year. So that gets us to 6.
Okay. All right. Got Chair. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And thanks, Councillor Montague. And last but certainly not least, external liaison to the committee, Archie Johnston.
Thank you, Chair. I just for the other committee members, so that you're aware, I had a bit of a lengthy conversation with Mike earlier this week just to go through a number of the points, and I was very satisfied with the understanding and also the direction and the work that the Auditor General has been performing over this last year. So, congratulations, Mike, on doing a great job. There were 2 points I was wanting to make on the annual report. I guess the first one is just sort of echoing the comments of Councillor Kirby Young, just about the importance of the whistleblower function moving over to the Auditor General's domain. And I appreciate your doggedness in terms of chasing that through and being the squeaky wheel. So I think that's important to move along in 2023. And the other one was around the goal 4 about the positive return on investment for Vancouver taxpayers. I think that's going to be something that that council and also the taxpayers will be looking at. So again, I think that's important to keep your eye on it and just be able to report back in a positive way the value of the function. Those are my comments, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, Archie. Okay. Seeing no further, oh, sorry, Councillor Montague, are you back on the queue or? Okay, thank you. All right, seeing no further questions, would someone like to move a motion? Ideally to receive this for information and transmit it to the rest of council.
Move to receive.
Councillor Montague. Moved by Councillor Montague to receive. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none. Any additional discussion? Also seeing none. All right, this concludes item 1 on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is the report, building permit fees. And I'd like to now invite the Auditor General to introduce and discuss this item.
Thank you, Chair. We'll just get our slides up. Okay, thank you. The slides are up. It gives me great pleasure to speak to you today about the first audit report issued by my brand new office. I'd like to, if I could go to the next slide, please, Elise. Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking Mayor and Council, as well as the previous Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to conduct this work and contribute to improving the economy, efficiency, and effectiveness of the city's operations. Today, I'm presenting the results from our audit of building permit fees. The topic was identified in my 2022 audit plan based on a request from the Development, Buildings and Licensing Department. On that note, I thank DBL's General Manager and the city's Chief Building Official for their leadership in volunteering to go first and for the full cooperation that they provided and their teams provided during the course of the audit. You'll be hearing from DBL at the end of my presentation. So we go to the next slide, please. The purpose of building permits is to ensure projects comply with the Vancouver Building Bylaw, which we'll just call it the Building Bylaw in the presentation, to meet life safety, livability, accessibility, and sustainability requirements that it contains. Building permit fees are cost-based regulatory fees, a concept sometimes referred to as user pay. Cost-based fees are set at a level that's intended to recover the full cost of providing the service. The city's effectiveness in achieving its cost recovery objective is the subject of a separate audit to be released later this year. The next slide, please. DBL's housing review and building review branches assess the vast majority of building permit fees for new buildings and were the focus of our work. The housing review branch administers permits for construction of new 1- and 2-family dwellings, laneway houses, and secondary suites. The building review branch processes building permit applications for most complex construction projects and residential projects apart from single-family and row houses. Per the building bylaw, building permit fees are charged in accordance with a schedule of fees that are updated annually. The building bylaw requires that fees be calculated based on the estimated value of the proposed work or the estimated construction value stated by the applicant in the building permit application. The bylaw also allows the city's chief building official to review the value of the proposed work and to substitute a different value using a cost estimation tool called Marshall and Swift. Next slide, please. The objective of the audit was to determine whether DBL implemented processes to accurately and consistently assess building permit fees in compliance with the building bylaw. We examined building permit fees for new buildings administered by the Housing Review and Building Review branches from January 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. Next slide, please. We set out to examine the accuracy of building permit fees, associated administrative processes and practices, and whether these processes were designed to comply with all relevant sections of the building bylaw. The audit was focused specifically on building permit fees for new buildings and did not include other related permits such as building permits for renovation projects. There may be a large number of these other projects, but the dollars involved are relatively small compared to new construction. We also didn't examine the processes administered by the Finance, Risk, and Supply Chain Management Department, including the cost recovery model, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the subject of a separate audit released in the coming weeks. Also out of scope was an assessment of the building permit processing times. While I know this is a topic of great interest, processing times were under review by the city's Permitting Modernization Task Force at the time of the audit, and I just didn't see value in inserting myself in the middle of that. However, do reserve the right to look at the success of their efforts at a later date. Next slide, please. Thank you. Included in the scope of our examination were just over 1,000 permits issued by the Housing Review Branch with an estimated value of construction for approximately $630 million and total permit fee value of $4 million, and 64 permits issued by the Building Review Branch that included an estimated value of construction of $3.2 billion and with a total permit fee value of $17 million. Overall, we concluded that DBL implemented processes to consistently and accurately assess building permit fees, substantially in compliance with most of the relevant sections of the building bylaw. However, we found some significant exceptions related to processes administered by the Housing Review Branch and identified areas for improvement in both Housing Review and Building Review branches. So at this point, I'll ask Lori Barrett, my Deputy Auditor General and the engagement leader for this audit, to present the audit findings and resulting recommendations. Lori?
Thank you, Mike, and good morning, members of the Auditor General Committee. As Mike noted, the audit focused on the two branches that administered building permits for new buildings.
Slide, please.
In the HRB, we found that over 10 years ago, the branch had designed a simplified process for assessing fees using a $250 per square foot multiplier to substitute for the value of the proposed work provided by the building permit applicant. We found that this process was not authorized by the building bylaw in two ways. The multiplier was not derived through the Marshall and Swift method authorized in the bylaw, and the multiplier was used to calculate the value for the proposed work based on the project's square footage when estimated values were not provided by applicants as required. We also found inconsistencies in the application of the process that resulted in undercollected and some overcollected permit revenue. Staff told us that their processes for utilizing the simplified multiplier was to receive applications and use the higher of the estimate provided by the applicant or the value of the $250 multiplier applied against the net floor area in the application. We sampled 64 of the 1,096 permits in scope for the Housing Review Branch and found that only 52% of the applications included the value of the proposed work, and the remaining 48% did not. We also found several inconsistencies in the Housing Review Branch's application of its processes. Approximately 20% of the time, the multiplier was used instead of a higher estimate provided by the applicant, resulting in an undercollection of $27,394, or approximately 11.4% of the overall fee value. Minor errors in the net floor area used for the calculation resulted in some less significant fee over collection. And we were told that an amount to cover a typical square footage for detached garages was built into the $250 multiplier. However, the same multiplier was used for projects with no garages. Next slide, please. In the Building Review Branch, the processes used to assess fees complied with the building bylaw. The value of the proposed work submitted by applicants was used to calculate the permit fee. The branch had developed a project value breakdown worksheet to collect detailed information about the value of the proposed work from applicants, but had no documented guidance on when to seek supplementary cost information. We found that detailed cost information was not often requested from applicants. Next slide, please. The audit's first recommendation is based on the findings I have described. I will not read it in full, but in summary, we have recommended that DBL should address the discrepancies between the building bylaw and the administrative design of the building permit fee assessment process. This could be accomplished by redesigning processes to more explicitly comply with the building bylaw, or researching and recommending to Council amendments to the building bylaw, considering a different method than using the value of the proposed work as a basis for charging building permit fees. Continuing on with findings related to our second recommendation, the audit found that neither branch had written procedures or guidance for building permit fee assessment processes. Staff told us that they received informal guidance from supervisors and colleagues. Other than the 3 types of inconsistencies found in HRB's assessments that I noted earlier, we did not find evidence that processes described by management and staff were not followed. Next slide, please. Based on these findings, we recommend that the Development, Buildings and Licensing Department should develop written guidelines or standard operating procedures for staff to follow when administering processes to determine building permit fees and provide training to staff on these processes. The audit also noted that the building bylaw requires applicants to state a value of the proposed work that includes the total current monetary worth of all proposed materials, construction, and work related to the building. The monetary worth of the proposed building is further defined in the bylaw. However, the city's building permit application form included minimal information on the city's expectations of what to include in the value of the proposed work. We recommend that the Development, Buildings and Licensing Department should enhance the guidance provided to building permit applicants in order to support applicants' inclusion of complete and accurate information in their application forms. In our examination of the accuracy of building permit fees, we found that for permits assessed by both branches, once the value of the proposed work was determined, fees were accurately calculated 100% of the time using the city's schedule of fees for development and building-related permits. However, DBL did not collect information or reports to support monitoring to ensure that the value of the proposed work was assessed consistently. Based on this finding, we recommend that the Development, Buildings and Licensing Department should develop a process utilizing information available in POSSE, the city's permit workflow management system, to monitor for administrative consistency of the building permit fee process to ensure that fees are being assessed correctly. To validate whether the value of the proposed work used by the city to calculate fees was reasonably accurate compared to using the Marshall and Swift method identified in the building bylaw, we completed a detailed review of building permit applications selected from both branches. For the HRB, we found that the value of the proposed work used to assess fees was reasonable. The multiplier used fell within a reasonable range of the Marshall and Swift assessment during the audit period. However, the $250 multiplier had been in place for many years, so was likely higher than Marshall and Swift in the past, and will likely soon be lower if the $250 value is not adjusted. The BRB projects we reviewed also fell within a reasonable range of our Marshall and Swift assessment. During our examination, we also noticed discrepancies between construction estimates submitted to the city for the same project at the rezoning and building stages, or buildings that required community amenity contributions, or CACs, to be paid to the city. We decided not to expand the scope of this audit to include CACs, and we are considering undertaking an audit that will examine in more depth the inconsistencies we observed. We have included in the report a recommendation that the Building Review Branch should review the value of the proposed work submitted for projects that have provided estimates during rezoning applications to determine if they would assist in assessing the reasonability of the values provided in building permit applications. And this slide concludes the presentation of findings. The Auditor General has the last slide.
Thank you, Lori. There are two recommendations before the committee. Essentially, that the committee receive the report and endorse the recommendations, and that it recommend to council that they receive the report and endorse the recommendations as well. But before we go there, perhaps this would be a good time to ask DBL for comments.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I would like to take this moment to invite DBL to comment.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Andrea Law, I'm General Manager of Development, Buildings and Licensing. Just like to thank the committee for having us here this morning, and just a thank you to Mike and Lori and their team for including us in this process. It's been a very collaborative process, some great learnings and findings for DBL, and just want to thank you both so much for your professionalism and your collaboration on this work. I just wanted to provide a bit of history, just so the committee is aware. When Saul Schwebs and I, who is the current CBO, is here with me today, stepped into these roles about a year and a half ago, this is an area that we acknowledged we needed to revisit. So the opportunity came up to work with the Auditor General and his team. We welcomed it as an independent review of our program to get better insights into how it was run, where there was inefficiencies, and where we needed to really improve the program. Over the years, since I've been with the organization, there have been a few attempts to look at this program. At the time, as council is aware, and previous councils, we were dealing with permitting timeline challenges. So the optics of increasing the cost of construction or revisiting it at that time was not supported. So we feel like we're in a better place, and this is a real opportunity for us to move this forward and take a deep dive into the program and opportunities to improve it. So as I mentioned, the audit offered an opportunity to gain insights into our administration of the cost valuation program, look at the inconsistencies, which we knew were there, and opportunities for improvement. So just want to acknowledge that DBL leadership, there is significant complexities with the current cost valuation program and the tool that we've used for many, many years. So this complexity has contributed significantly to some of the inconsistencies identified. So we'll be exploring other acceptable industry tools that may offer a simplified cost valuation methodology. So yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to the team. We're very supportive of the recommendations that the Auditor General's team has put forward, and committed to working with them to get her a better cost valuation program for the city. And happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Andrea. And with that, I'm going to invite the committee if they have any questions of the Auditor General or the manager of DBL. And seeing none. Oh, no, Councillor Kirby-Young. Sorry, my apologies. Councillor Kirby-Young, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And thank you for the report and to DBL for the comments. I'm directing this question to the AG, and the one thing that really struck me in reading this report was that it focused on the discrepancy in the application of the existing standard, being Marshall and Swift as defined in the Vancouver Building Bylaw, but there was reference in the report with respect to other cities that used alternative valuation methods and some commentary, I believe, that they may enable potentially greater accuracy, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But I'm wondering if why there wasn't any commentary with respects to whether or not the method that the city of Vancouver itself was using was optimal versus are we applying the chosen method that we have that we've currently adopted and specified in the building bylaw, and or you might tell me that that's out of scope potentially of the review, but I'm going to ask the question in terms of comments, because are we trying to sort of line up, if you will, with a standard that perhaps might not necessarily be optimal? That's the crux of my question.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Kirby-Young. You'll, I'm sure, understand that we tread very carefully when it comes to matters of policy. It's not really within my domain to challenge policy direction that this council has provided to city staff as evidenced through the building bylaw. What we have said, though, if you look at our first recommendation, is that perhaps this would be a really good idea for DBL to have a look at other potential options for how this could be calculated and to come forward to council with a recommendation for improvement that would perhaps be more streamlined and equitable.
Okay, in the sense that, maybe if you could paraphrase and reflect back to me what it is that is challenging to be equitable about the current system that's used in layman's terms.
Well, there are some questions as to whether the estimated cost is in fact the best basis on which to determine the value of building permit fees, or whether perhaps the simplified method that the city has in fact been using, a set square foot rate, is perhaps a more reasonable basis and indeed far more streamlined way to go about it.
And that is it. Could one extrapolate, therefore, that if we used a set rate per square foot, that as we are attempting as a goal to streamline our processes, that could support greater efficiency in processing of applications if we just adopt a simple standard?
The application of Marshall and Swift is a fairly labor-intensive process. And
Right.
we actually used it as part of our detailed testing. And while it's not something that that we do on a routine basis, we did have contractors helping us with that who do this on a professional basis. It is quite a bit of work and quite a bit more work than applying a set rate on a square foot basis. So if we're trying to achieve efficiency and if we're trying to achieve fairness, then it seems that that's not a bad thing. It's a challenging part in the findings is that, well, we found that the city's practices were not in compliance with bylaw, and the letter of the bylaw. They weren't necessarily bad.
Can I, thanks, I appreciate that. And can I, with the time I have, can I ask DBL if they'd like to respond to that on the potential to shift valuation methods to something that would be more streamlined for staff and for applicants?
Yes, Andrea Law, GM at DBL, and thank you for the question. So yeah, our thoughts exactly. Marshall and Swift, we've acknowledged, is a very, very complex tool. In conversations with many staff who have been part of this audit, staff who have been here for more than 20 years, who work closely with building permit fees, who still don't understand the methodology. So over the years, we've tried extracted different tools to modify and simplify the process, not only for staff, but for our applicants as well. And I think definitely a flat rate is something we're going to be looking at. I think in the short term, we'll be coming to council with some amendments to give the CBO more authority to assess building value cost valuation, so that we can address it in the short term and bring us more aligned with the BBBL requirements, and then look at longer term solutions, which will require engagement with industry.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. That's my time. Thanks, Andrea.
Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Kirby-Young. I have a couple of questions that I'll jump on and ask. And first, it's of the Auditor General, and I just want to reflect that this is our first real audit, and I'm just wondering if you have any reflections on how this process was. Any room for streamlining engagement? How are things going?
This process here, and
Yeah, this particular audit.
well, I think it's important that while we present findings and recommendations, that there be equal opportunity to respond to those. So that's why we have in our report a section that where we ask for a response from the audited department, and if possible, to provide an action plan for addressing the recommendations. But there may come a time when perhaps a department doesn't agree with the direction that we're suggesting, and this would be a good opportunity for us to have that conversation in the room and allow the committee members here to discuss it and come to a decision as to whether to support our recommendations or not. So the process here of me and my team presenting our findings and recommendations with a response from the audited department, I think is a very healthy way for us to proceed, and one that I hope that we will continue to do for all of our reports going forward.
Great, thanks, Mike. And I wonder if I might ask the same question of Andrea Law, just how the process was for you and your team, and I also just want to take a moment to reflect that I appreciate that you and your team have inherited an onion's worth of complex layers of stuff over decades, and really appreciate the work that your team's been doing on this file in particular. But just wondering if you can comment on how the audit process was for your team.
Great, thanks very much for the question. Yeah, so as I mentioned, we were very excited when we heard that there was an opportunity to participate in an audit and put this forward as an opportunity. Again, it's something we've been looking at over the years. Sol and I have been in different roles previously where we've acknowledged this was something we needed to tackle. So when the opportunity came up and we realized this was an option, we were very excited. So from the very beginning, it's been a very collaborative process, and had every member of our team has been willing to participate and happy to participate, knowing that it's an administrative issue that we need to address, definitely, but it's just the capacity to do that in the team with so many other initiatives going on. And industry was quite satisfied with the methodology we're using, acknowledging it's non-compliant, but at the same time, we were happy to participate. The process itself has been very collaborative. The team was very respectful of staff time, a lot of time in meetings, sorting through this very complex issue. So yeah, it was a good process for DBL, and I think I speak on behalf of the team when I say that.
That's fantastic feedback. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Seeing no further questions, I'm wondering if the clerk can pull up that slide and maybe we can, oh, sorry, my apologies. Archie, I see you put your hand up. Archie Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just I had a couple comments. In terms of what jumped out to me when reading the report, I guess was one that, and I felt the comments were very good, the observations, the audit findings, was that it's really important that the process is in compliance and authorized by the building bylaw. So I think I'm glad to see that the department is working on that to make sure that that is the case, because you don't want people paying fees that aren't consistent with what the bylaw is requiring. So I think that's important. And the second one was the written procedures. When you have a complex process, which I think you have, it's really important to have the instructions so that staff understand how to apply it consistently and fairly. And so that was the importance of adding some written procedures on, I think, is also very important. I noticed that. And I agree with Councillor Kirby-Young in terms of the simplification, because the Marshall and Swift process is fairly complex, and if there is a simpler way, it would expedite the process of approving and also assessing, and also aid people that are going through the process. understand a little bit more clearly what their fees are going to be. So I think it's going in a very positive direction. And again, I think based on my discussions with the Auditor General, I think that the process and the work that was performed was really very thorough and very of great value to the city. So those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Archie. Oh, I see Councillor Montague on the queue. Councillor Montague.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll be super brief. I echo a lot of the things that were said by my colleagues, but I just wanted to add that I'm super supportive of all 5 of these recommendations in the report. Transparency, clarity, fairness, consistency are all things that we're striving for, obviously. I think one of the things that we've heard from over and over and over again from the builders and developers is predictability. And I think that's one of the things that that these 5 recommendations will help bring to the table. That's all I have. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Montague. Now we have some recommendations from the Auditor General for the committee, and I'm wondering if the clerk can pull that screen up. We can have recommendation from the committee.
So moved.
Thanks. Moved by Councillor Kirby-Young. I'll just get us to pull that up in any, is that possible, or just for clarity as we put that forward and ask folks to, oh, it's up.
Nope.
My apologies.
Slide 21. Yeah, if you put that up, please. Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, clerks. I'm assuming everybody else can see this. It's not coming up on the live feed, but in any event, it was moved by Councillor Kirby-Young, and all in favor, say yay.
Yay.
Seeing none opposed. That is moved. Any further, without any further discussion? That concludes item 2 on the agenda, is there? And the next item on the agenda, and thanks, clerks. The next item on the agenda is the Auditor General Committee External Liaison Recruitment. And I'd now like to invite the Auditor General to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. As committee members know, the external liaison member, Karen Keelty, had to resign from the committee due to scheduling conflicts. I spoke to Karen and thanked her very much for her service to the city and her willingness to participate in this new process. But unfortunately, she has yet to master the art of being in 2 places at once. I'm still trying to do that myself. And so we have to go through a process to find a replacement for Karen. And that's a process that is led through the clerk's office. So hence the memo that is before you outlining suggestions for how we should proceed. I don't really have any further comments in that regard, unless there's anything else you want me to speak to, Tina?
Thank you, Chair Fry. I would just simply add that the report is there before you. We can put the recommendation up on the screen. And while we identify 2 options for recruitment, one being a targeted recruitment and the other being an open one, we do recommend in this case that it be a targeted recruitment for the reason that the terms of reference indicate that candidates require accounting, public finance, and recent management experience, and therefore the targeted approach will ensure that we reach out to potential qualified candidates here in Vancouver, and it'll help us with moving this forward at a quick pace to fulfill the vacancy. And I would also identify that in the clerk's department, under legislative operations, our manager of civic agencies recruits for all civic agencies for the city. So we would work through that already established plan. If there's any questions, myself or the manager of civic agencies would be happy to answer.
Do we have any questions from the committee? So we have two considerations before us. Would somebody like to move a motion? Once again, the suggested remedy would be consideration A. To anyone from the committee to move the motion recommendation.
And Chair Fry, sorry for the interruption. I should have noted that the recommendation B, we're suggesting that you have a committee of 5 here of the Auditor General Committee, that we look for perhaps 2 to assist with that recruitment process, and then we could report back to the full Auditor General Committee for a recommendation from that working committee. So A, we're looking for we're recommending a targeted approach, and B, we're recommending that a committee of perhaps 2 members of the AGC assist us with that recruitment. And then we would be able to come back with a report to the full Auditor General Committee. Those
Okay.
are our recommendations.
So my apologies, Sam. We're looking for recommendations A and B with the inclusion of 2 additional committee members, or
If we could have 2 committee members assist us with that recruitment, sort of a subcommittee of the Auditor General Committee to work with staff in the recruitment, and that we would report back to the full committee.
okay. So scanning the WebEx for an indication of anybody willing to volunteer themselves for this committee.
Councillor Chair Fry, I just had put my name on the list for a
my apologies.
question.
Sorry, I'm looking at your WebEx for. Here you go. Over to you,
That's
Councillor
okay. I just wondered if this is sort of thing is always a bit more awkward to do, not in the room, being able to sort of read the room. So I'll trust you on that. But I was trying to remember who was if yourself as chair and Councillor Kirby-Young were both on the Auditor General Committee before, when the office was getting started, and if perhaps the 2 of you would make sense then to be on this committee.
We did have an external, we had a separate recruitment committee, which I was not a member of. I'm not sure about Councillor Kirby-Young.
I could speak to that if you like, Chair.
Oh, please.
Yeah, I had the benefit of sitting on both the Auditor General Recruitment Committee and the Auditor General, I forget what the terminology was, but essentially the Establishment Committee to establish the office. There were 2 separate committees that then morphed into this current one, and the current membership that we have. And the Recruitment Committee had, its scope was to recruit Mike McDonnell, so the actual Auditor General, but also deal with things like terms of reference for the external advisory members, if I recall correctly, that were brought forward. So I think it's a function that can be handled by any committee that is interested in participating. I think there's a fairly clear definition of what skill set that we're looking for. I would also note that now we're in a different position, that we actually have our Auditor General on board, who could also, I think, provide some valuable input into this process, given the expertise. So what I don't see, and I would put out to the committee this morning here, and this is clarity as to whether or not the Auditor General would be invited to be part of this process, or that it's deemed better that it is just the committee members. But we had the benefit of having a search firm that was assisting us with hiring the Auditor General, and some pretty detailed kind of description of the skill sets that we were looking for. So I would be looking to try to understand that gap before we affirm a recommendation this morning.
Thanks to Councillor Kirby-Young. I'm going to
And
invite the
and then
auditor.
the other thing I would also say is too that I think that, and I'd love to hear from our current external advisory member who is actually doing this, to get your perspective, because you were on the other side of that process when we were searching for experts like you. And I certainly think that the current external advisory committee member who's actually doing the job should also be part of this. And I don't see that explicitly, perhaps it's inferred, but I don't see that explicitly stated in this recommendation as it's written right now either.
Okay, so I'm going to invite first the Auditor General and then Archie Johnson to comment.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be more than happy to assist the committee in this process. And to that effect, Archie and I have already had a fairly lengthy conversation about potential candidates and people that we could approach, assuming that this was the direction that the committee wanted to pursue.
Thanks, Mike. Archie, any comments?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree in the targeted approach. I think the nature of this role is probably some skill sets that it's probably better to be going after certain individuals if they're willing and wanting to be part of the group rather than an open call. So I support that. I also would be pleased to be part of the um, I guess the search group for the replacement for Karen, and and I have no concern with Mike being part of that as well. It's often difficult if we're the oversight. Sometimes it's awkward for the person to be part of the selection of who's going to be overseeing yourself. So there could be some awkwardness there, but I would think we'd be able to overcome that if that's the wish of the committee.
Thanks, Archie. So I'm sensing that the best path forward here is we can certainly invite input from the Auditor General, and that Archie is volunteering for this subcommittee. I will also volunteer for this subcommittee and looking for one more from our committee to volunteer for this subcommittee.
Councillor Montague?
Oh, Councillor Montague was just volunteered.
I see I've been
I just, in the spirit of just
volunteered.
providing opportunities to other folks, not that I couldn't do it, but I think it's nice to spread the love.
Yeah, Chair, I'm happy to. Obviously, I'm the new guy in town. I don't bring much experience to this skill that may be needed, but I'm happy to be part of it.
That's great. Okay, so Clerk, did you catch that? This subcommittee will be Councillor Montague, Chair Fry, and our external liaison, Archie Johnston. Good to go. All right, with that, the recommendation AB, is somebody prepared to move it? Oh, look at this, we have a special guest. Deputy City Manager Karen Levitt is on the... Thanks. Just nice to see you. Sorry. Anybody
I'm
prepared?
happy to move, Chair Fry, if you need a mover.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. All in favor?
Can you, a point of procedure, Chair, can you
Sure.
just clarify the language? Because the recommendation we see on the screen is not what we've discussed verbally. So just so that we and the public are clear for the record,
So
what we're voting on.
we'll just, I think what's lacking here is the insertion of the names
On B.
on B, yes. Can we edit that in real time, clerks? The insert names, can we edit that in real time?
The clerk here, Chair Fry. Yes, certainly. What is written on the screen with the insertion of yourself being part of the committee, Councillor Montague, and external member Archie Johnson. I believe that sums it up.
Thank you, Clerk. I believe so. Councillor Kirby-Young? Is that?
Yes, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that was moved by Councillor Boyle. All in favor?
Yay.
Okay. Opposed? Seeing none. That concludes item 3 on the agenda. Final item on today's agenda is other business. And I have submitted said other business to the clerks and circulated to the DL list. This is essentially a reflection of our challenges with quorum at this committee, and recognizing that we run a pretty bare quorum with one counselor away today. Should we have another sick or whatever, we would be unable to conduct our business. So putting some recommendations forward for the clerk to report back on the 2 discussed items there. And with that, I'm going to relinquish the chair to Councillor Boyle, Vice Chair, since I'm putting this forward. So, Councillor Boyle, you take the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fry. I see Councillor Kirby-Young is on the list. I wonder if the clerks can advance her.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to propose an amendment to the amendment, and I can speak to it if you want to move us to an amendment queue. Thank you. I really appreciate Councillor Fry bringing this forward, and I think it is good to have some resiliency in enabling the committee to continue to do its work. I think I was reflecting on, well, why do we have 5 members? And I think that was purposeful in the sense that it was a sufficiently representative number of councillors versus having a small group that may not necessarily reflect be sort of reflective of the broader body. And I think that's important. And yet I really appreciate and take the point with respect to being able to carry on the work, so to speak, in the event that we lose somebody. So in reflecting on that, I wasn't as enamored by the idea of reducing the quorum to 3, because considering that we have a council of 11, that's about a quarter of the membership. And I think versus when you have 4 or 5, I think you're getting decisions and outcomes that are more reflective of the body as a whole. So in sort of taking that line of reasoning, my thought was I would prefer to see us take the route of appointing an alternate. And the other consideration as well, just in terms of efficiency in the spirit of the morning, which I think is what having the Auditor General is about, is that rather than have the clerks go and have to do additional work to decide and come back to us with pros and cons on going to a smaller number or going to an alternate and or any other options, that would take more time when we're trying to just, I think, make a simple change to address what we know the challenge and the issue is. So I also put some language in there around just coming back at the next meeting with a simple addition of adding an alternate that the committee could endorse, the AGC committee, and then we'll go to council, as we know that council has to approve that as well. So that was the spirit of the language I've submitted, which now reads that the committee direct the city clerk to report back at the next scheduled AGC meeting with revised terms of reference in recognition of the current high quorum threshold of 4 or 5 members present, by adding an alternate committee member position for the committee's endorsement and subsequent recommendation to council. So I put that out for the committee's deliberation.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby-Young. Councillor Clerk, do we need to move to an amendment to the amendment queue? Maybe we're already there. I just don't have that screen in front of me.
Currently, yes, I'm on. Vice Chair Boyle. We have the main motion and we have the amendment from Councillor
Okay.
Kirby-Young. So we're currently in an amendment Q1.
Great. Okay, thank you, Councillor Fry. Sorry I took up a little of your time there, but
No problem.
go right
I'm
ahead.
just jumping on to say I'm totally comfortable with this amendment. I think, you know, so long as that we have willing alternate to participate, I think that's great. And I think that's a better road forward so that we do have some breadth of voices at the committee table.
Great. Thank you for that, Councillor Fry. Seeing no other speakers on the list, I'll ask the clerk to move us to a vote on the amendment to the motion.
Oh, were we actually doing an on-screen vote? Oh, my apologies.
Oh, I guess we could have done it.
Oh, vote assist in favor, please.
Are you able to see the votes, Vice Chair Boyle?
I can't see the votes.
Okay,
No.
so I can let you know that it passes unanimously.
Great. Thank you, clerks. And now, seeing no one on the list, we'll move to a vote on the amended motion.
Vote assist in favor, please.
Again, Vice Chair Fry, we have a unanimous vote in favor.
Great. Thank you. And I will pass the chair back to you, Chair Fry.
Thanks, Vice Chair Boyle. Okay, that concludes our last item on the agenda. And we will move to adjourn. Now, just a reminder, we do have an in-camera meeting, and I believe we have to take a slight break to do that at 11 o'clock when the room is clear, getting a nod from the clerks. So we will reconvene in camera at 11 o'clock. But in the meantime, we need, may I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Montague. All in favor, say yay.
Yay.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. This meeting is adjourned. Our next scheduled Auditor General Committee meeting is on March 2nd, 2023 at 9:30 a.m. And we will reconvene in camera in 17 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.